Hello there, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Liam Kilby. I am the Associate Director for the MBA Recruitment and Admissions team. And it's a pleasure to be with you today for anything from 45 minutes to an hour to talk about the Oxford 1+1 MBA. So if you've been to one of my webinars before, some of these slides might be a little bit familiar. But just to clarify, we're talking specifically about the 1+1 MBA today. That's our 2-year program. We'll talk a little bit more about what that is. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the benefits of that, some of the unique opportunities that it can provide. But if you're here about the MBA, the 1-year program, we're not really touching on that in isolation today. We have a few slides. Let me turn my camera on so I can see you, or you can see me. There we are. Nice to see you. We have a few slides that we're going to go through. I'll turn my camera off for those, but in the meantime, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask me, the Q&A function is really the best place to do that. So if you can put your questions into the Q&A box, I'll make sure that I review them as they come through. And if there's a question that is relevant to the slide that we're on at that time, I'll try and answer it in the moment. If it's a question that maybe is going to wait till the end, we have a Q&A 15 minutes at the end, or as long as we have left over, then I'll try and answer it then. What I would say, folks, if you don't mind, please think a little bit about the question that you're asking. If it's a very specific question about your profile, do I think you're a good fit for the program? Here's what your experience is. What GMAT score do I think I need to? Those kind of questions are more personal to you. And while I'm happy to answer those maybe on a one-to-one conversation or in a different medium, I'm going to try and tackle the questions that are more general that apply to more of the audience today. So if you're thinking of sending a question through, try and find a way to word it in a way that is relevant for more people than just yourself, if that makes sense. And there's more chance that I'll be able to then answer that in general terms. And then we can follow this up with another conversation that is specific to you and your circumstances. So don't wait for the slides to start. If you have questions, please do send them through. I'm going to turn my camera off, but I'll keep talking and we'll get through the slides. And at the end, we'll have some time for the Q&A. So great to have you with me. Thank you very much for joining. I hope you find this information session very useful, and I'll be back on camera again for the Q&A at the end. Okay, so when we think about Oxford, and if you have been to one of my sessions before, this is a slide you'll have seen. This is quintessentially what Oxford looks like. If you looked on Google Images and look for like a picture postcard of the city, this is really what you would expect to see. This is that quite famous architecture from the 1400s. And it really is the typical kind of life that you would experience as an Oxford student in the wider university. And in the 1+1 program, you are very much in that wider university in that first year. So for people that may have not come across the 1+1 program before, it's a 2-year program. It's built of individual 1-year degrees. So in year 1, you'll be in the wider University of Oxford studying something such as a Masters of Public Policy, Social Science of the Internet. There's a whole list of partner programs that we'll go through some of them later on. But you choose which master's degree you would like to do in year 1. You go and study with that part of the university. You live in one of the colleges that you'll see on the screen here. And then you'll graduate from that with your master's degree in your chosen field at the end of your first year. And then in your second year, you'll come to the business school and do the 1-year MBA. And then you bolt those two things together, and that makes your 1+1 program, hence the name. It's 1 degree plus 1 more degree. Just to maybe anticipate some questions that may be coming through or that might come through as we go. A question we often get is, does it have to be in that order? Is the MBA always the second year? And for you officially to be a 1+1 program member, then yes, it does have to be in that order. And it's important to remember this phrase, folks. If you are an official member of the 1+1 program, we'll get back to what that means a little bit later, but there are some things that will influence and that will be a factor for. So if you want to be an official member of the 1+1 program, you would need to do the MSc of your choice in year 1 and then the MBA in year two. It's that order. Now you can do it the other way around. Some people will come to the MBA thinking, I'm there just for the 1 year. They realize they love their time at Oxford and they think, oh, I want to stay. I want to do another master's degree. I want to do a second year now. And they kind of do the 1+1 in reverse. Now, you absolutely can do that if you want to, but you will not be officially a member of the 1+1 community. And we'll come back to why that's important a little bit later. So this picture kind of encapsulates your first year at the school. And the second year will be much more at the business school, which is this picture. And so if you've been to Oxford, you'll recognize this building. It's right next to the train station. It's quite different in terms of architecture from what we were just talking about. This is a more modern building, about 20 years old. It was extended about 10 years ago and made a little bit bigger. And this is where the MBA is taught. So in year two, you'll still be living maybe at a college, you'll still be a member of one of the colleges, but your 9 to 5 working day will be here at the business school rather than the lecture theatres or the seminar rooms of the department you were in for year one. It's University of Oxford is separated into departments and into colleges, and departments are where the degrees are conducted, and the business school is a department, and we'll do all of the business and the masters in finance and those kind of things at the business school. And your department might be, so for example, if you're doing the Masters of Public Policy, your department will be the Blavatnik School of Government. That's your department. And so in year one, you're in those buildings learning from that set of faculty and learning those ideas and disciplines and vocabulary and concepts. And then in the second year, you come to the business school, and that's your department. Your college experience outside of your 9 to 5 working day will be the same. You'll be in the same college for the 2 years that you are a 1+1 student. You do not switch colleges when you switch programs after the first year. So your college experience will be consistent throughout your 2 years, but your 2 departments will be quite different. And if you're going for Blavatnik, that's also quite a modern building. But if you're going for a more established department that's slightly older and more typical Oxford, you might be in those buildings that we showed you in the first slide. So it's good to get your head around the idea that your place of work, your place of study, so to speak, in year one will be different from your place of work and your place of study in year two. And this is what year two will look like at the business school that you see in front of you. So the 1+1, it's a fairly unique program. There are a few similar programs out there. For example, you might do Masters of Public Policy, MPP, at the Kennedy School, and then go to Harvard and do their 2-year MBA. Now, obviously, that's a 3-year program because the Kennedy School is 1 year, and then the Harvard MBA is 2 years. So it's a bit longer in terms of duration to the 1+1 here at Oxford, but it's a similar kind of concept. You pair something first with an MBA second, and it really allows you to get a depth of understanding in year one. You become an expert in your field, whatever MSc you've chosen to do that master's degree to the level of rigor that you would expect to do it at Oxford. You do become an expert. You will become a leader in that discipline and a leader in that field. And then when you pair that with the second year, you get the breadth of knowledge and the breadth of experience you need to be able to understand how large-scale business works, or how you can influence large-scale business to then forge a career in your chosen field from year one. So it's really the best way to think about it is year one is the depth of knowledge to become a real subject matter expert. And then year two is more about how do I apply this subject matter into a commercial, practical, large-scale global organization and impact change. So you get 2 degrees from Oxford, the 1 plus the 1. You get a bit more time to think about how do I transition my career by using these 2 degrees to get to where I want to be, to pivot or accelerate to where I want to go to. And in lots of ways, even though you are paying for 2 Oxford degrees, it's still more effective in terms of cost than maybe a traditional 2-year MBA elsewhere at another school, with the added benefit that it's not just an MBA that you're doing that first year as well. It really enriches your knowledge. One thing that we'll talk about today in a few slides time, but is definitely worth thinking about if you're considering the 1+1, is the Pershing Square Scholarship. This is a scholarship that is given out each year to a small number of people, but it will cover your tuition fees for both years, and it will give you a living stipend to help with living costs for both years at Oxford. So we'll go into that in much more detail when we have some information on that in a few slides time. Just a quick word about the colleges, because I recognize that for some people dialing in today, the concept of what an Oxford college is might be something that's quite new to them. As I mentioned before, we have departments and we have colleges, and departments are where you go to study. That's where you go to work. And you'll spend most of your working day there, 9 to 5, 10 till 6, whatever the hours are that you choose to do. You might go to a library in between lectures. You might not be there for the whole working day, but that's where your lectures take place, and that's where you will learn from faculty. Outside of your working day, you'll be a member of one of the colleges. And depending on which partner program you choose, which master's degree you choose, your option of colleges will be limited to maybe 6 or 10 different colleges you can pick from. And don't forget, you keep that college for your second year for the MBA as well. So you can choose which college you would like based on the option you pick in first year for your MSc. And this is really going to be your social hub throughout your time at Oxford. So within the college network, within your individual college, and there are about 40 individual colleges at Oxford, you'll be a member of one of them. And what that means is this will be your social hub, where you might join a sports team or join a society or take up a hobby that you've always wanted to try. There'll be formal parties and dinners and balls happening within the college grounds. There'll be lots of ceremonies and events and guest speakers. And one of the real benefits of the 1+1 program, because it's embedded in that wider university, you are surrounded by people that are studying lots of other disciplines, but being housed or being a member of the same college that you are. So when you're sitting down for dinner after your working day is done in your department, you'll probably strike up a conversation with someone who you haven't spoken to before. They're in the same college as you, but for their 9 to 5 working day, they're going to a different department of the university to learn another discipline. And you'll have a conversation that will expand your horizons and stretch your understanding of the world. And that sounds quite dramatic, I know, but it genuinely will. And so if you're studying an MPP in public policy and you sit down and you speak to somebody who's doing something in astrophysics or artificial intelligence or medieval languages or sociology, then the conversations you have can't help but widen your appreciation of other disciplines and expand your horizons. Not geographically, although it is a very international cohort, but I'm talking about your mental horizons, understanding the way you think, understanding how you approach different challenges, understanding how people of a different mindset approach that same challenge that you're approaching, but in a different way. And the viewpoints you'll hear from and the people that you'll learn from, that diverse academic community, is a real benefit of being in the wider University of Oxford. So you'll be fully embedded in year one because you're studying in the wider university. You'll still be fully embedded in the college network in year two, because although you're doing the MBA, which is less of a traditional University of Oxford subject, some might say, you're still a member of the college. So you're still going to have dinner or join a sports team or go to a party or go to a ball with hundreds of other people in the same college as you, but they're not studying business and they've never really considered business. And you'll be able to learn from them, they'll be able to learn from you. And the network, the academic community you can build around yourself, is something that is of a real benefit to you when you think about, well, what do I want to do with my career? Even if it's a fairly niche career, it only helps us all to have exposure to different cultures and viewpoints and ways of thinking. And this melting pot that is Oxford University, that is full of some of the brightest minds you'll come across, but some of the most different minds you'll come across in lots of ways. It's a really nice and effective foundation to build that wider viewpoint base that goes on to really help support you in your future careers. Let me go into some of the partner programs. I say some because this slide just isn't big enough. I've chosen some of the ones that have been picked most recently by 1+1 students. We have about 35 partner programs that are official partner programs of the MBA. And don't forget, you do these first and then the MBA second. So Masters of Public Policy is probably the most popular choice, and that's why it's at the top of the list. But you'll see here, there's just a real range of things that you can pick from. Education, social data science, all the way down to music. And that can be composition, that can be performance. Even education can be about academic learning education or education systems, modern languages, tropical medicine, criminology. And that's just, what is that, 8 or 9 options from the list of about 35 that we have. I think it's important at this stage to say, if there is a program at Oxford that is not officially a partner program, so you'll go to our website, we'll list all 35 options that will be an official partner program. If you want to do something that is not a partner program, you are more than able to. But it comes back to, you will not be formally recognized as an official 1+1 candidate. And why is that important? I'll tell you in a few moments. You'll still be part of the community. You'll still feel like you're a 1+1. You'll probably label yourself as a 1+1 student because you are doing an MSc first and an MBA second. The application system and process is different if it's not a partner program, an official partner program. And when it comes to the scholarship, you might be at a bit of a disadvantage. And we'll talk about that in more detail. So on the one hand, it's good for you to think, okay, what official partner program do I want to do? That does bring some benefits if you go for an official one. On the other hand, I don't want people to be too dissuaded if they think, well, actually, for me, the right thing for me to do and the right thing for my career to do is to go and do this maybe partner program that might not be official, but actually is just the right choice for me. And I understand it might come at a bit of a risk to some scholarships. It might come at a bit of a risk to other things. I might not officially be considered a 1+1 candidate, but it's fundamentally the right thing for me in my development and my career. And so it's a bit of a trade-off there. Hopefully, we'll have something in the official list that will cater to your needs. And it's a list that we review each year. We have departments of the university that are keen to come on board. And so there's just a bit of an onboarding process. We'll probably have some more options, hopefully, from the Nuffield School of Health in the near future. That is another thing we might add. But at the moment, the list is about 35 strong, and I would recommend you go on there and have a look at that and see which, if any, hopefully at least one of them, is the one that you want to partner your MBA with. Now, we don't really mind which one you pick because it has to be right for you. Part of your application to this program will require an essay that explains why the 1+1 is important for your career. And in that essay, you might want to talk about why you have chosen to pick whichever partner program you have picked. We aren't going to second guess your reason for your partner program. That reason probably makes perfect sense to you. And as long as you can explain what that reason is to us, we're not going to judge you on that. But it is worth thinking about, can I frame this choice in a compelling enough way in my essay about the 1+1 that makes it make sense to the admissions committee at the business school? For example, and I don't think I'm offending anyone here because I don't think anyone has taken it yet, you could do an MSc in Russian literature as an official partner program. It's not on this slide, it's not on this list because it's very, very randomly and rarely chosen. But if you wanted to, you can. Now, as part of the admissions committee for the MBA for the 1+1, I would expect whoever's applying for Russian literature and an MBA to come up with a very good reason why they think Russian literature and an MBA is the right combination of academic learning that is right for their career. Like, I'm not saying that's impossible, but I'm sure there's a set of circumstances out there that makes perfect sense for someone to do that. But I haven't seen anyone really apply for that one yet. It's one of the options you have. But I think some of these partner programs lend themselves more naturally to being paired with an MBA than maybe some of the others. So just think a little bit about your choice, and in your essay, think a little bit about, how can I explain why this makes sense to me? As long as it makes sense to you and you can explain it, that's all we need. But you will have a job to do to get that through in your essay. Let me just have a quick review of the questions to see if any of them are around the partner programs. Bear with me for one moment, please, folks. Let's have a look. Nothing about the programs, I don't think. Let me just double check. Okay, I'll take this one. What are the chances of the business school rejecting a place on the MBA if I get rejected at the partner school? That's a good question. Thank you for asking that, whoever that was. You haven't given your name, so forgive me. Good question. The applications are viewed independently. So, for example, and we'll talk about the application process in a few slides' time, you need to apply to both programs independently of each other. So you'll do one application to your MSc of choice and the department that runs that. You'll do one application to the business school for the MBA section of your 1+1. So 2 different degrees, 2 different applications. Your department that does your MSc of choice don't really care at all if you get onto the MBA, because they are looking at your application for their program in isolation of what they're looking for their program. So they'll know you've applied for the 1+1 because that will be on your application. But they will review your credentials based only on what they look for their program. On the MBA, we'll also see that you've applied for the 1+1. We'll see which partner program you've chosen, but we will review your applications based on what we look for on the MBA. Now, rarely, and it is rarely, but not impossible, we might think, okay, for your career plan to work, what you tell us you want to do in your application, we at the business school think you probably need both your MSc and the MBA together to make your career plan viable. If we think that, we might say on the MBA side, your admission to this program is conditional on being admitted to your MSc, because you don't always hear about them at the same time. We'll talk about the timelines in a moment. But it might be that you hear back from the business school first before you hear back from the other department doing the master's degree. So on rare occasion, we might say that to somebody and say, we like you, we think you're strong, we want you to come and join the MBA, but we think you need this other master's degree first. So we're only going to admit you if you get into that program as well. The vast majority of cases, and I'm talking about 95% of cases here, folks, we don't really mind if you're not successful with your application to the partner program, because we see enough of you or enough about you in your application to the MBA that allows us to think this person is strong enough to be on the MBA, regardless of whether he, she, they get into their partner program. We want them on the MBA no matter what. And so then it doesn't really make any difference if you're accepted or not. The only difference it makes is that you are planning on filling your first year with a master's degree, which maybe you have not been successful in being admitted onto. And so now you have a choice. Do you do something else for that first year? Do you try and get into a master's degree elsewhere, another school maybe, and come back and do the MBA in your second year, like you would have done if you'd got into the one at Oxford? Or do you bring your MBA forward by a year and say, well, I didn't get into the first year, Liam, can I bring my MBA forward and just do the MBA on its own? And that is also an option. So we're getting into the detail a little bit there, but to answer the question, very rarely we might make it conditional that you get both programs before we let you into the business school, but on the vast majority of cases, we'll make a decision that is outside of and independent of your admissions decision to your partner program. I hope that answers the question. While on that subject, I'm not sure if it's the same person, it's another anonymous question. Is the 1+1 program harder to get into than each course individually? Not really, because you kind of almost answered your own question, because you're applying to both courses individually, albeit under the umbrella of a 1+1 program. And because they're being viewed independently, your applications are being viewed independently. To a large extent, you actually are applying to both programs independently, unless you are one of that 5% of people that I just talked about, that real minority, where we think, actually, we think you need both together. Otherwise, we're not going to get you into the MBA. But it's such a small amount of people that I think it probably is safe to say you should approach this as though you are applying to 2 programs individually. And in that case, no, it's not any harder at all. Okay. The Pershing Square Scholarship, folks, this is something that we're going to spend just a couple of slides on because it's very important, and it's very important because it's a very prestigious scholarship. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, this is a scholarship that will cover all of your tuition costs, all of them for 2 years, no matter which combination of programs you do. Now, the MBA is the most expensive option for of the 1+1. No matter what you pick in the first year, it won't be as expensive as the MBA. But your option for year one, the price will vary based on which one you go for. At the time of talking about this, I think the MPP at the Blavatnik School of Government is probably the most expensive option for year one. So if you do MPP and the MBA, that is the most expensive in terms of tuition costs. That is the most expensive combination of programs that you could pick. But if you're a Pershing Square Scholar, it doesn't matter because there's no cap on the tuition fee that it covers. So even if you chose the most expensive combination of MPP and MBA, the Pershing Square Scholarship will still cover all of that tuition cost for you. It also has a living stipend, which gives something just over £19,000 sterling per year to go towards accommodation, rent, food, your lifestyle, however you want to spend it, it is yours to spend as you see fit. But that is £19,000 for each year. So 38, almost 38 and a half when you multiply it by two. £38,500 for living expenses for your 2 years at Oxford, plus also all of your tuition has been covered as well. So it's a very prestigious scholarship. What we're looking for are people that can answer this question on the screen. There is an extra essay you will have to write for your Pershing Square Scholarship application should you want to apply for Pershing Square. Now, I know there is probably an overkill of essays when you're applying to business school programs, folks, but I don't know why anybody would not apply to Pershing Square. It's an essay you have to write. It's a bit more work you have to go through, of course, but at the same time, the benefits, should you be selected, are certainly worth the effort, I think, of writing an essay about why you think you're a good fit for the Pershing Square Scholarship. And this is the question that you'll have to answer in your Pershing Square essay. And it simply says, how do you intend to change the world, and what does this tell us about you as a person? Now, I don't know what people automatically think when they read that. Some people might automatically think, well, that means they're looking for entrepreneurs who are going to change the world by talking about, I don't know, fresh drinking water somewhere, or solar energy, or renewable energy, or food systems, or healthcare systems. What I would say to you is that we don't narrow it down to any sector. We don't narrow it down to any practitioner. If you can join a large multinational, and I've got some profiles of recent scholars in a couple of slides' time, you'll see kind of where they're working. It's large commercial institutions. We don't want you to be thinking about the next great entrepreneurship idea. If you are an entrepreneur and you have got the next great entrepreneurship idea, incredible, then talk about that. If you're not an entrepreneur, if you're somebody that's been working at large scale business, but you see a way that you can use the 1+1 to affect positive change in the world, then that's what we want you to talk about. So it can apply to anybody in any field, working at any level, but there has to be a desire there and an inclination to really want to make a change to the world in a positive way. Of course, no one's going to make a change in a negative way. That goes without saying, but it's good just to talk about anyway. So that's the essay that you'd have to write. And we don't really mind what you write about, as long as you feel as though you can answer this question in a way that tells us about your passions, your interests, your goals, your intentions, then that's what we're looking for. The scholarship itself, just some facts and figures, and it's a bit wordy, this slide, folks, forgive me, but it's up to 6 awarded each year. We had 5 awarded just in this year that's just passed. As I've mentioned, tuition fees for both years, living stipend throughout your time at Oxford. This is a really important point to make. We'll talk about application deadlines in a minute, but applications to the 1+1 program have to be submitted to both areas, your department for the MSc and the business school for the MBA, no later than a certain time of the year. If you miss that deadline, you can still be admitted onto the program, but you will not be considered for Pershing Square. We'll talk about when that deadline is in a little while. Shortlisting and interviews take place in around April and May of each year. So you'll notice there straight away, you'll have an interview for the scholarship itself if you're shortlisted. So as well as any admissions interviews for the program you'll have had to go through in your application to the program, you'll also have an interview for the scholarship if you're shortlisted. And that will happen around late April, and we'll announce the recipients of the scholarship sometime around mid-May, thereabouts, roughly each year. It's kind of always the same time. In terms of who we're looking for, academic achievement with the University of Oxford, we like academic strength. That can be undergrad degrees, that can be a GMAT score at the business school side, or a GRE if you choose to take that. That can be awards that you've won in your professional career. Anything at all that kind of fits that academic achievement bracket. Leadership potential is good to see. That doesn't mean you have to have been managing people for a set number of years before you apply. It just means, have you demonstrated your leadership skills in your roles, in your academic life, and how can you tell us about those in a compelling way? This is what we were talking about in that previous slide, your intention to focus on addressing world-scale challenges in your career, impacting a change within your career, and then almost as important as identifying what change you want to affect, the ability to envision how you can scale your solution to make it a world-scale challenge that your problem is going to fix. So if you're an entrepreneur, for example, and you're working in your local area at the moment, maybe, I don't know, maybe you're working in part of the developing world and you've got some local landowners, some local farm owners, and you're thinking about agribusiness and you're helping them on a smaller scale. Can that solution be scaled onto a larger than just, the surrounding 20, 30 miles that you're currently working in, 200, 300 miles that you're working in? Can it be scaled to be a bit bigger? Can your idea be scaled to address a world scale problem? That's kind of what we're looking for. This is where not being an official 1+1 candidate can sometimes damage your chances. There's a hierarchy of people that are eligible for Pershing Square. Students on official partner programs, and that's one of the 35 that's unavailable on our website if you want to have a look at those, they will be looked at first for Pershing Square. If we can't find strong enough candidates who are on official partner programs, we will then look at the next batch of people, which is people that are on any program at Oxford coming to do the MBA in their next year. So you can be on a non-official partner program. You can do an MSc of anything in Oxford. You've applied to do the MBA, so we know you're coming. We'll only look at you if there aren't strong enough people in the official partner program list. Full disclosure here, folks, I've been at the school for about 8 years. We've been running Pershing Square for about 10. I think in the time that I've been as close to this as I am now, I've known one person who was outside of that top priority list of official partner program students. I've known one person get it ahead of someone else that's not been on that list. So for example, we've got 5, 6 a year. I've been here for 8 years. The scholarship's been running for 10. We've probably got close to 55 to 60 scholars in the Pershing Square alumni over that 10-year period. And I'm saying that one of those 60 people was not on an official partner program. All 59 others were. So this is where you choosing an official program really does make sure you are in the conversation at the top of that queue. Now, again, if an official partner program isn't right for you, don't make it fit just to try and get the scholarship, because it won't be a very compelling application. But I want to be straight and upfront and transparent with everybody that if you choose to go on a non-official partner program, you will be in the second tier of candidates that we look at for the scholarship. I'm just going to show you a few recent profiles of some Pershing Square scholars. You've got the year that they attended, you've got the partner program that they did, a little bit about what they did before and what they're working on now. And you can see straight away, and this is actually pure coincidence, but all three are working in finance. So none of them came in as an entrepreneur. Geo in the middle there, he worked at the UN. So he was obviously working in one of the largest NGOs there is, but he wasn't an entrepreneur. He now works for BNP Paribas. You'll see there's a little bit of kind of ESG in there. There's a little bit of climate change, but even Geo is technology intelligence director. That isn't a very kind of impact. You would expect an impact-driven career, not in that social impact kind of way of defining that word. So I think my message here, guys, is really just don't worry too much if you've got a very commercial background or your dream and your goal in your career is to remain in a commercial institution. That does not mean that you are ineligible for Pershing Square. That is not the case at all. I think the most important thing is that journey that you're going to go on. And if you think about Sophie, for example, coming in from the UK Treasury, helping with policy during the time of COVID before she joined in September of 2021, it made natural sense for her to then go and do a Master of Public Policy. And I don't know if she was expecting to join Barclays afterwards. In all honesty, I don't know if that was her plan. But working with an ESG policy within a large financial institution, that isn't that much of a stretch when you consider she was forming and shaping policy at the UK Treasury beforehand. So it's the journey you're on and the journey you want to go on that has to make sense. And that will be much more important than whether or not you're an entrepreneur creating impact or you're already creating impact in a way that you'll carry on doing so after you've left. You're allowed to pivot. We would encourage you to pivot. We would encourage you to be ambitious with your career. It's your career. It should be a level of ambition attached to it. But this is just a quick snapshot of some of the people who are successful, both with the program and admitting onto the program, but also being selected as a Pershing Square Scholar. If you go onto our website, you'll see the current batch of Pershing Square Scholars. So Sophie graduated from the MBA last September, a year ago now. You'll obviously be able to understand this, folks. I'm sure you've worked this out for yourself, but in any given year, we have two cohorts of scholars. We have the scholars that are just about to start their MBA. So they're halfway through the 1+1. They've just done their MSc. And then we have scholars that are about to start their MSc, start their 2-year journey. So every year, every calendar year, will award 5 or 6 new scholars, but there'll already be 5 or 6 scholars that are coming up to the end of their first year who got the award the year before. And I think one thing to mention about the scholarship before I move on, it's not just about the money. I mean, it is a lot about the money. It's a large gift you'll be given, and it covers everything, as I've mentioned. But it's also exposure to a community of scholars. You'll be open to some kind of mentorship. You'll get some access to some workshops and some programs and some activities as a scholar community. There's an annual trek to Pershing Square in New York that takes place in the spring, and you'll go and do some company visits. You'll go and see companies like Robin Hood. You'll go and see companies like Carnegie Hall. It's a real range of different sectors. You'll have some industry advisors and some industry leaders talk to you about their careers. You'll meet Bill Ackman, who is the founder of Pershing Square. And so there's a real community to this, and not just for Pershing Square scholars too, but also for the 1+1 community as a whole, because not everybody who gets the 1+1 admission will get a scholarship. And so it's really important for us to make the 1+1 community feel like they are all a community. And it's not just, well, they're the scholar community and they're the non-scholar community. That isn't a fair way of looking at it. So everybody on the 1+1 will get access to the business school in their first year. Even though you're not really studying there yet, you'll get access to the careers team, should you want it. You'll get access to the programs team, should you want it. You'll be invited to events that happen at the business school. There'll also be a business school set of Pershing Square scholars and 1+1 students who will take you under their wing and say, when you come here in a year's time, after you finish your master's degree, this is what you can expect. And let's get some of those expectations set ahead of time. There's always kind of a passing of the baton from one outgoing scholar community and 1+1 community to the one that's incoming. And it's a really nice community that's being built. And it's possible because having 2 cohorts of 1+1 students at once allows that continual overlap. Every time we get a new batch in, there's always an existing batch that are 1 year into their program and have walked the steps that you're about to walk for yourself when you join for the first time. There's always that nice, I guess, comfort blanket more than anything else that allows you to tap into and lean on these people that have lived and breathed the experiences that you're about to live and breathe yourself. This is probably the most complex part of what we're going to talk about today. I'll leave this slide up for a little while and I'll see if there are any questions in the Q&A about the application process. But briefly, you need to be applying to both programs in the same year, not at the same time. If you don't want to, you can if you want to, but in the same year, in the same recruitment cycle. And what you'll do, you'll think, okay, well, what is my partner program of choice? You'll select your partnering MSc first. You'll see what they look for their entry requirements. You'll submit your application to the MSc by whatever deadline you want to, and each department, whichever option you pick, will have slightly different deadlines. So research those deadlines as thoroughly as you can. And then you'll hopefully receive your MSc offer. Now, it's important to note here, folks, that some departments do not interview for their master's degrees. So depending on which one you pick, you might not have an admissions interview for your MSc. It will just be a decision that is made solely on the application materials that you submit. There'll be no interview, and so you won't really ever meet them in person. They'll just read your application and make a decision on the back of that. So that's all happening on the left-hand side of the screen. At the same time, you're thinking about your MBA application. So for us, you'll need a GMAT or a GRE. You won't need that for your partner program. They won't even really know what the GMAT or GRE is, likely, depending on which one you pick. But for us, you'll need it. For the MBA, you need to apply by the January deadline. And I've got a screenshot of the deadlines in the next slide, but apply no later than January, because otherwise you miss out on Pershing Square. We do have a March deadline. You can apply later than January if you want to, and you can be admitted onto the program still, but you will not be considered for Pershing Square, because by that point, the shortlisting has already started for those April and May interviews. You will definitely have an interview for your MBA admissions. That is guaranteed. Everyone who gets onto the program must have an interview. So unlike some of the partner programs where they don't interview, if we think you're strong enough, we will interview everybody for the MBA. And then hopefully you receive your MBA offer. So it's important to note here that even though the 1+1 is staggered over 2 years, and you do the MSc first and the MBA second, you don't wait to apply to the MBA until you're on the MSc. You're applying for both programs in the same year, and we're pushing back the MBA admission for year 2. It has to happen at the same time, not in the same deadline, but in the same application cycle. And by cycle, I mean September, when applications open, through to March, when applications close. That is the window within which you have to apply to both of your programs. Let me put the deadlines up on the screen for the MBA. This is just for the MBA, and I'll see if there's any questions in the Q&A about the application process. Bear with me for a moment, folks. Okay, this is a really good question. Another anonymous attendee, thank you for sending the question through. How are the acceptances for the programs given out, since there are 2 separate applications? Will we have to accept and place a deposit before we know if we're accepted into the second program? So in every case, the MBA will come second. And it is likely, if you choose to apply for the MBA first, let's say, for example, and September is kind of in red because it's past now, but the next stage you could apply if you want to is October the 1st. This is for the MBA. So you can apply for the 1+1 in October, and we will view your MBA application as soon as we get it, and we'll make a decision within a month, 6 weeks. You'll know if you're in the MBA or not. That could be before you've even applied for your MSc. It's almost definitely going to be before you hear back from your MSc, even if you have already applied to them, because we move sometimes more quickly than some of the other departments. So you're faced with knowing that you're in the MBA, but not knowing if you've got into the MSc. You may not have even applied for the MSc yet. Now, you might expect that you then have to commit to the MBA before you know you've got into the MSc, but that is not the case. If we admit you onto the MBA as part of the 1+1 program, we admit you. That's an unconditional admission for 95% of those people that we talked about earlier. And what that means is we will hold your place for 2 years' time, but we won't ask you to pay a deposit for that place until, at the latest, kind of July of the year you're about to join. So let's just put some numbers on this to make it a little bit more simple. If you're applying this year, that means you'll start your MSc in September of 2025. You'll join the MBA in September of 2026. That's what we're talking about for people applying now. If you get into the MBA, you will not have to pay your deposit to that MBA until the summer of 2026, just before you join, a few months before you join. It might be March, April, May, but it won't be until three to 6 months before the MBA starts. You will not have to pay your deposit to the MBA anytime before that, while you have time then to figure out if you are going to go into the MSc. If you're applying to the MSc first, you may have to pay a deposit for that course before you know if you've got onto the MBA, but that's probably less troublesome, I would think, because I don't think you would turn down the MSc even if it meant you didn't get onto the MBA later. Because if you wanted to, and this is definitely an option, you can start the MSc, accept that place, and maybe you've been turned down by the MBA committee. But while you're on your MSc in that first year, you can just reapply to the MBA and just tack it on at the end anyway. Again, you won't be an official 1+1 student, but you can still do those 2 programs in 2 years. So I hope that answers the question. I know this can be a little bit confusing at times, folks, but that is the answer. You do not have to pay a deposit for the MBA until you just before you join the MBA in 2026. So you'll have plenty of time to figure out, what am I going to do in that first year if I don't get onto the MSc? Do we have any other ones in terms of applications? If applying for scholarships for both programs, should students apply simultaneously, or is there a recommended timeline for applying to scholarships for the secondary masters after securing MBA funding? Okay, this is a good question. It's fairly complex. Let's take Pershing Square as the way that you're going to fund it. So for Pershing Square to be considered, you have to be applying to the MBA side no later than stage 4 on this window, guys. January the 6th, 2025 is the deadline for Pershing Square for the MBA. Whichever department you apply to for your partner program, they will have their own January deadline. It might be a different date. By chance, it might be the same date. That is just coincidence. But you have to have applied to both of your programs no later than their respective January deadlines to be considered for Pershing Square. If you're going for Pershing Square and you're in your programs and get accepted by both, you'll know by March, April, if you're being shortlisted for interview. Now, in the meantime, if you're hedging your bets that you might not get Pershing Square, then you should be looking at scholarship options for the first year, which is your MSc year. And that will be a conversation with the admissions team in that department. So I can answer your question about MBA scholarships, but I can't answer your question about other forms of MSc scholarships. Broadly speaking, the college that you might be a member of will have some scholarships for graduate students. The wider university will have some scholarships for graduate students. You should look into those. But I can't tell you what timelines to look for, because it will be dependent on which program you've gone for, which options are open to you. On the MBA side, if you've applied to both programs and you haven't got Pershing Square, if you found a way to fund your first year while you're in your MSc, you will then become eligible for all other MBA scholarships while you're on your first year, so that when you join us in your second year, you'll have known with plenty of time that you've secured some funding. You can only apply for Pershing Square once. So if you apply for Pershing Square at the beginning when you apply to the program and you're not shortlisted, or you're interviewed but you're not successful, you can't then apply for Pershing Square again the following year just to cover the second half, just to cover the MBA. That is not an option, I'm afraid. But there is a lot of other MBA funding that all 1+1 candidates who have not got Pershing Square will be eligible for and will be considered for from that whole year. So September 2025, you've started your MSc, you're there for 12 months. In that entire 12-month period, we on the MBA side will be looking at ways that we can help fund your MBA when you join us in 2026. I hope that answers the question. It can be a little bit tricky to get everyone's head around this, but yeah, there's lots of options about funding, but when and how depends quite a lot on the option you've chosen for your partner program. If a student receives a scholarship for the first master's program, is there any guarantee or preference given when applying for MBA funding the following year? No. Let's forget Pershing Square for a while because that covers both programs. If you've got some independent funding for year one, we won't even know you've got that because it's two different departments. We don't see the funding decisions for other departments. So unless you tell us, oh, by the way, I got some funding from Blavatnik to do the MPP in year one, unless you tell us, we won't know. And therefore, if we don't know, it can't possibly go towards a preference or a guarantee that you get some funding for the MBA. Please don't forget that in your second year, if you're trying to secure funding for the MBA, those funding decisions, you'll be up against every other MBA student that is being admitted that year. So it can be quite competitive, and it would be unfair of us to guarantee or ring fence some money for you if you've got money in your first year, because it could be that, someone else who's applying has done a master's degree elsewhere and they got funding for that too. And so do we ring fence money for everyone who's previously had a scholarship somewhere else? That makes it quite difficult to do that. So the answer is no. Is the MSc in Advanced Computer Science a 1+1 program? Yes, it is. Look on our website, you'll see a whole list of 35 of them. That is one of them. What number of students apply and how many get enrolled yearly? This is the best question I've had so far because I don't know what people expect this number to be, but I'm happy to share. We probably only have, and I think only is the right word, we only have about 120 applications in total to the 1+1. And that is obviously their partner of choice, their partner program of choice, and the MBA together, 120. I would say the number of people that are admitted onto both will vary a little bit each year, not by a huge amount, but it won't always be the same number, obviously. And I would say anything between 15 to 25 students will be admitted onto both programs. So what is that? One in 5, 1 in 6 get in, about that. But the numbers aren't huge, guys. The number of applications aren't huge. And I think that ratio of 1 in 5, 1 in 6 is testament to actually how hard it is to get into Oxford. It's the University of Oxford, and you're trying to get into 2 different programs at the University of Oxford. Getting into one program is tricky and competitive, but getting into 2 is obviously doubling up that trickiness and competitiveness. So we don't see thousands of applications because the 1+1 isn't right for everybody. Yeah, it can be quite a niche, real in-depth learning in that first year, paired with something that has to make sense with an MBA in the second year, and that everyone can tell us a compelling version of why that story is important for them. So it can be competitive, but it also isn't for everybody. But the numbers aren't huge. And if we work that down again, so let's say in a year there's 16 people that have been admitted, and we're awarding 5 or up to 6 Pershing Square scholars, that means that 6 out of 16. And so what is that? 36%, I think 37% off the top of my head. Just over 1 in 3 will get Pershing Square. If it's 20 people that have been admitted, that percentage goes down. So Pershing Square is very competitive, although on the face of it, giving 5 people that scholarship out of 16 makes you think, oh, I'll be one of those 1 in 3. I'm sure I will be, but actually it still is quite competitive. So the numbers aren't huge, but the level of competitiveness is definitely still there. Hi Liam, if getting accepted onto the 1+1 program of my choice, would all financial fees be paid up front to start the first program? Do you mean all the financial fees in terms of the entire 2 years? I'll assume that's what you mean. And if my company or country offers to sponsor my studies, how will the financial fees be presented? Thank you. Okay, good point. No, so you will be presented at the beginning of each of your years with an invoice for the tuition fee that covers that year. So in year 1, you'll be giving an invoice by the department that runs your partner program for the cost of their tuition. And at the beginning of your second year, you'll be provided an invoice by the business school for the cost of our tuition. So you will not be paying 2 years of tuition up front. You will pay for the tuition for the preceding year, and then the tuition for the following year at the start of that year, if that makes sense. So if you're being sponsored by your company or by your country, they will be billed twice, probably. And that will be at the beginning of each academic year for the tuition for that year. Now, if they prefer to pay it all up front, that is something we can probably arrange. We haven't really had that option presented to us before. I think people prefer to pay for the year that they're about to do and then no further, because life can get in the way, things might change, you might not want to do the second year after all, and you don't want to have to pay for it until you know you're going to do it. So often we'll break it down into year by year. Here's your tuition for the next 12 months, please pay this now. And here's your tuition for the next 12 months, please pay this now. It's in separate blocks. I think that's what you were getting at, but send me another question in the Q&A if that doesn't answer that one. Can you defer your 1+1 admission when you get it? There's a deferral process at the university that is fairly strict, folks. You can defer. You can defer any program, or you can at least ask to defer any program that you want to at the University of Oxford. But often the university will only allow deferrals for a really compelling reason, and we're talking about horrible things that I hope no one goes through anytime soon. So it might be a death of a member in the family. It might be some kind of terminal illness that you or a relative or a friend or a partner or a family member has been diagnosed with. That is definitely reason to defer. It might be that actually for some reason you've just finished a course of work or a job or another academic study period, and that's taken a toll on your mental health and you want to have a break from academia for a while. That's probably a good enough reason. So there are reasons that you can defer. If you just say, I'd like to defer because I just want to take a year to travel, that probably is not a valid reason to defer, and your deferral will be rejected and will expect you to come in the year that you've applied for, or you lose your place and you have to reapply again. So in theory, yes, you can defer, but I would say only for the really, quite strong reasons that I don't particularly wish anyone to go through anytime soon. But it's possible. And if you find yourself in that situation, then definitely ask the question. What I would say is, don't apply with a deferral in mind, because then the question would be, well, why not just wait? Just wait until you're ready to come, because that deferral might not be granted, and you'll have gone to all that work and all that effort to get into the programs and then defer and then be turned down and then have to come or withdraw. And that's not a situation that I think you want to get yourself into. So if at the back of your mind you're already thinking I might want to defer, then just don't apply yet. Apply when you're ready to come. Okay, this is a good question. Let me move on to a couple of slides and we'll get this, hopefully should answer this question for you. This is a quote from our dean. I'll leave this up fairly quickly. This is the dean of the business school. And then the question that I'm about to answer is, I'm interested in participating in study programs. I'm currently making preparations. I have some concerns about my background and life after enrollment. Would like to discuss them, especially with an MBA admission staff before applying. There is no information session scheduled in my current area. In this case, how can I approach the admission staff to discuss with them? Great question. Please use this email address. So if you want to get in touch with me or with the team, that QR code on the screen should take you directly through to my LinkedIn account. Connect with me on there. We can start a conversation. We'll get the conversation going. If you have concerns, if you have questions that I haven't been able to answer today because they're just more specific to you and your set of circumstances, if we haven't really covered it in a way that I've helped you understand the admissions process and you have more questions, then either email us there or connect with me on LinkedIn on that QR code and we can keep the conversation going. Guys, we're just about at time. I just wanted to say thank you. Let me turn my camera on again, just at the end here. I just wanted to say thank you for joining me today. It's been really great to have your company. It's been really great to have your questions come through. I'm sorry that I didn't have a chance to answer all of them. I'll try and get to some of them offline and get back to you. If you've left your name, I should be able to get hold of you and drop you an email on the email address you've registered to the session with today. If you don't hear from me and you have some burning questions, please get in touch. On the screen, you'll see the email address and the QR code. We'd love to keep the conversation going. We do travel quite extensively. Hopefully, we will be in your part of the world over the next few weeks and months. But if we're not, as this person said on the Q&A, then get in touch with us. Don't wait for us to come to you. We'd love to hear from you, and we're happy to get that conversation started. Thank you very much for joining. I hope it's been of some use for you. Any questions, please let us know. And hopefully we'll see your applications come through in the next few weeks and months. So good luck if you're applying in the next year, and hopefully we'll see you on campus in September of 25 or later if you're taking your time. Thanks again, and goodbye for now.